There are reports that socialists are preparing to replicate Minneapolis-style chaos to combat ICE sweeps in New York City. Breitbart News reports tonight that activist networks are working to expand Minneapolis-style protests into other major American cities. According to Breitbart Immigration, the report claims that socialists are planning to replicate Minneapolis chaos as a tactic to combat ICE sweeps in New York City. Breitbart frames the development as an organized effort rather than spontaneous protest. The report suggests that political groups are preparing coordinated actions aimed at disrupting federal immigration operations, building resistance networks, and creating rapid response systems that mobilize crowds when ICE activity is detected. The significance here is strategy. Rather than protesting policy, these groups, they are reportedly seeking to interfere with law enforcement itself, potentially increasing the likelihood of confrontation with federal agents in high-density areas. Breitbart also ties this to the national conversation about so-called ICE watch-style movements. That's where activists monitor enforcement and attempt, if they can, to pressure agents or to obstruct operations through mass presence. New York City is a key location for such tactics due to population density, as well as sanctuary policy disputes and deep infrastructure or activists that are organizing. If Minneapolis becomes a template, as Breitbart claims, the result could be an expansion of immigration enforcement conflict from one city into a national wave. Now we turn to a story that's gaining traction across conservative media and online political circles. Revolver News published a report titled, "Mike Benz Reminds MAGA Who the Real Enemy Is, and It's Our Fault." That's the name of the article. The piece centers on public remarks from Mike Benz, who is the former State Department official and current executive director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. He has become known for documenting what he calls the modern censorship and information control apparatus, operating through a mix of government influence, non-government organizations, and tech enforcement networks. In the Revolver report, Ben's core message is not focused on a single politician or election result. It's a warning about how the power structure operates. Benz, he argues that many Americans have aimed their anger at surface-level political enemies, while the deeper machinery that shapes institutions, media narratives, and internet control continues functioning, regardless of who wins a given election. The Revolver article frames this as Benz urging conservatives to recognize that activism and public outrage alone is not enough if the larger infrastructure of cultural enforcement and state and private coordination remains intact. Benz is known for speaking about speech governance. Those are model systems where governments may not ban speech directly through the law, but they can pressure private platforms, corporations, banks, payment processors, and major internet infrastructure providers to throttle or even remove targeted voices. That point, of course, connects with the Benz message that is broader, that modern conflict is not only fought with weapons and armies, it's fought through enforcement of information systems, funding pipelines, and control of public visibility. Benz, he has emphasized in other appearances that free speech, well, it's under great assault, and this battle is far from over. In a Real Clear Politics video clip, he said the following, quote, "The free speech fight is just getting started," end quote. Revolver's report uses Ben's frustration to underline what it sees as a pattern. Conservatives, they often react to outcomes without dismantling the mechanisms that produced them in the first place. And by saying it's our fault, Mike Benz, he's saying that the public allowed institutions to grow too powerful, too unaccountable, and too insulated from oversight. The tone of the Revolver article is blunt because really the stakes, they're that high. Benz argues that the U.S. is facing a form of internal capture, not necessarily by one party, but by interconnected networks that exist across administration changes. Regardless of whether viewers agree with Mike Benz's conclusions, the reason this story is spreading is simple. Many Americans feel like elections do not fully change national direction. And Benz, well, he's offering a theory for why this happens. Would you like to gain access to 36 years of Christian worldview programming, news and information, all my books, ebooks, documentaries, and more? Worldviewtube.com/vault. Worldviewtube.com/vault. Understand the times, where we've been and where we're going. Worldviewtube.com/vault. In tonight's Worldview Report commentary, it is based on two pieces by our friend, broadcast partner, and longtime guest, Robert Spencer, who is the man that runs jihadwatch.org and writes over at frontpagemag.com. One of Robert's articles is titled, "The Shockwaves from Trump's Actions on Iran Could Be Felt Right Here at Home." And then the other one, he titled, "Iran's Khamenei is Talking About Trump Like a Man Who Just Won a War." Spencer's warning, well, it's simple, but it's very important. What happens in Iran doesn't stay over there. The Middle East is not isolated from America anymore. When the U.S. pressures Iran, be it militarily, economically, or strategically, there are consequences, and they can just show up right here on our doorstep inside the U.S. And that can include, well, threats of retaliation, cyber attacks, destabilization, surges of propaganda, and, of course, increased radicalization of the Muslims already here. Iran is not just a government. It is the center of an ideological network with proxy forces, sympathizers, and influence operations. Pressure on Iran, well, it often triggers activity through those networks rather than direct responses. Robert Spencer also points out something that's very revealing. Khomeini, he's talking like a winner. And that matters, because even if Iran is under strain, propaganda is still a weapon. If the regime can project victory, well, then it energizes supporters inside and outside of their country, and it intimidates opponents. That's the goal. It creates the impression that resistance is pointless and that Iran is unstoppable. That's how these regimes survive, through fear, propaganda, messaging, and ideological momentum. So here's the bottom line. Even when conflict happens thousands of miles away, well, the fallout, it can land here in our streets, our institutions, and our national security environment can be affected as well. And Robert Spencer's point is just that. Americans need to be prepared for reality, not surprised by it. And we agree wholeheartedly. Thank you again, Robert Spencer, for another eye-opening piece.